have the recording. Okay. So I think you all know each other already. Oops, Michelle dropped out. She will come back, I'm sure. So Nina, you're in Berlin.
Yes, still in Berlin. Good to see you all again.
Good to see you. Juliana.
Yeah, how is everyone? How are you doing?
Good. Where are you calling from today?
Berlin again.
Berlin.
Just
Herman
in my house.
from South Africa again. I'm also in Berlin. I'm sure Michelle will come back in. She just dropped out. She's also in Berlin. So welcome. Thank you all for coming again. Today, I'd like to ask you. So when we have these conversations, there are so many interesting, valuable thoughts and ideas and moments that we don't get the opportunity to follow into. And one of the participants, Tram, a friend of mine, she proposed an idea a while ago, and this idea is to use a platform called Tim's Flowers, and we can have a garden of flowers consisting of videos in that platform, and you can attach a response video to any moment in a video, in an existing video, and that existing video is in the center, and the responses are around it like petals in a flower. And so what I'm going to do after our conversation today, or during the conversation, I will take note of the time of when I notice something interesting that I think should be followed, that I want to respond to, but I can't. And then later, I will put that video into the Tim's Flowers app and start adding those thoughts as an experiment. So I will invite all of you to also do that, and then we could also start inviting other people that have been part of our multi-logs in the past into this type of conversation and into the future. So that's an experiment. We can try it, we can leave it. It's just another experiment. Okay. So I think we all know how this works by now. We do one round, everybody gets some space to share a personal experience of what it means to do what I called autopoieting, which is creating yourself. How do you create yourself? Can you create yourself? What can't you create or recreate or uncreate? How does this all work? This is where I'd like to start the multi-log today. And as a reminder, I wrote about this last week, and my personal experience was tied to I think a traumatic psychotic experience induced by severe drug taking that led to me wanting to go back in time and take a different route somewhere in my life. And the way I did that was by rereading all of the books I had read at that moment in my life, which reactivated all sorts of associations in my brain. I could almost literally feel my brain restructuring physically. And I could notice something new emerging out of that. That was really, very strong. And was one of the aspects for me to know that there is some weird recursive influence of myself, on my mind. And that is where my understanding of autopoiesis comes in. So now I've talked enough for the start. I'll let one of you guys take over. I'm just going to mute myself now.
I'm muted. I can start. In fact, this email of yours last week triggered me quite a bit in many different ways. I think this email was actually why I even showed up last week. I always felt I don't really belong in many ways, and a lot of what you described in like whatever we identify with felt very external. But I didn't have any answers of my own to any of those questions, to be honest. And only when I started to get out of my own environment, I started to realize that there are other options. And I think that already is a big realization compared to what you've been told the options, maybe in whatever, the way you choose relationships, the way you choose your jobs, the way you choose to live. But for me to realize how to even get to decisions of myself was a whole different journey from where I realized. What I would like to do is to highlight again a couple of pivotal moments for me. Some of them are very strong, like career-wise. I eventually developed a big dream of working in the music industry in my early 20s. And I really pursued that path and was on a very good track. And ultimately, that whole industry fell apart when I was just getting ready. So this whole dream kind of blew up in thin air. And I had to kind of reinvent, like, I wouldn't even say myself, but just the idea of what fulfillment may mean for me in a job. And then there were like a couple of years where it was really, really messy before I found something that I really enjoyed doing. And then I kept going on this for a while. And then I figured after like about 3-4 years, I realized whatever dreams I developed that are associated with that, what we call career, are actually just ideas imposed by the organization, what your typical next step of progression in that organization is, but that has actually nothing to do with me. And I ultimately left that organization and moved to a lot closer to what I'm doing right now, working with startups, which is a very suitable environment for me because you can keep like reinventing who you are, what you play with. It is a much more playful environment altogether. And it reminds me of the work that I initially wanted to do in music, because the dynamics are very similar. People seem to be a little bit more similar. but yeah, that whole like testing out where you stand and keep observing what it does to you, and if you still feel like settled or connected to what you spend most of your day with. I think that was really important. The other element that really resonated for me when you wrote that throwing yourself into different worlds, that was really intense for me, because I, like, as well as in the job but also otherwise, I kept doing that and immersing myself, moving to different countries, dealing with a whole like plethora of different people in my life. Like the spectrum of people that I engage with is tends to be very broad, much broader than most people who kind of stick to like a tribe, and they kind of start identifying with like one tribe, which never really felt enough for my, like, for the way I wanted to experience the world. So yeah, I'm still trying to understand the word that you used. Is this like an invented word, or is this actually something from a dictionary?
It's a Greek word, but
Uh-huh.
it's not usually used as a verb. So it's
Yeah.
autopoiesis,
Mhm.
the act of self-creation.
Mhm.
But I like turning words into verbs to make clear that it's something we do or can do.
Yeah, I generally, while like I've been doing this a lot, I generally think reinventing yourself is a rather difficult thing. It may, like, I'm not sure how actively you can pursue this. It may happen to you by the way you be exposed, um, and seeking it out is a thing. I do believe so. But if it ultimately happens, I'm not sure how much control we have over it. And I close with that for now.
Don't be shy.
The first time I heard that word was when I studied ontological coaching, and the methodology I studied, the ontological coaching, was very much created by Chilenians or ex-Chilenians. And one of them was one of the philosophers who strongly impacted on the methodology of ontological coaching was Francisco Varela. And I think he wrote a whole book about, I'm not sure whether I pronounce it correctly, Autopoieting. And I had great problems to understand that. Namely, the way I eventually got it was that I believe it's a property of living systems that allows them to maintain and renew themselves by regulating compositions and conserving its boundaries. Now, I shared with you last week that I was the opposite exactly, because I was on my way to destroy myself, not maintain and renew myself, eventually through alcoholism. And yet the interesting realization that self-renewal and maintaining after you become aware whom you really are, and maintaining that, and if necessary, renewing yourself, is something that saved me from dying of alcohol. And yet, it's still a philosophy I battle with. You talked in your write-up, Thomas, about the tools of self-destruction, etc. That's something I could strongly identify with. But living a kind of life today which is so different to the way I lived until about 20, 25 years ago is quite amazing. And I believe that kind of self-renewal they talk about under this topic is a distinct possibility. It definitely applies for me. And yet I think it's something we are often not aware of, namely the role that we play along, or if you carry on having your own opinion, which I did, you become a bit of an outsider. When I eventually handed in my resignation at that corporation, one of the directors, who was a dyed in the wool kind of corporate player, said he couldn't understand that. And I said to him, you know, it's not what I know and how I do my work. It's now whom I know and how I play the game. And I think that's really was my personal breakthrough, where the self-renewal started. By the way, Thomas, are we all now on that Google platform, or are you still on the Zoom platform?
No, it's all on Google now.
Is it?
Then I go along. It's a great topic, and I was very confused with the word. I didn't get it, what it meant. So it's really nice to listen to you all. But I can very much relate, because I've been renewing myself several times. I can very much relate about this part of what you wrote about isolating yourself and reading. And I'm kind of I'm not really isolated, but I'm in kind of such a phase at the moment, actually. And I related to the initiation rituals of the indigenous people, which is about being in total isolation and maybe also being in struggle, and but also really taking the time and space to get to know oneself. For me, the renewal is a lot about finding out who I am and learning who I am, because I feel, or at least I grew up in a very conservative home in Munich, where I was constantly told what one does. And I'm a rebel in nature, so for me it was always like, okay, what else is there? And so I think traveling was the first one to break out, to realize, okay, there actually is more. And then it was driven a lot by being kicked out of the finite game. Like me having the dream of becoming a partner of this fund, or then this family office, or this social business, and somehow it never worked out. The universe kicked me out again and again. Being in this partnership didn't work out, next one didn't work out, and but somehow I feel and then I feel the renewal comes from several parts. So there's the one part which is the family story, all these ancestors. I've done a training in family constellation. I've really deep dived over 2 years into my whole ancestors and family traumas, but also the strengths. And the funny thing is, so my mother comes from a wealthy household and my dad from a poor, and my work is connecting the poor and the wealthy. So I think there are some links in there. And my parents separated when I was 7. This was like one big traumatic event. So I sometimes wonder if my work is still trying to bring them back together. And then I think the other part is a lot about all my life experiences and the people I meet. And I sometimes feel like me or my soul is a mosaic of all these different people and experiences I've had in my life. And so I think I'm becoming much more conscious also on with whom and in what situations I put myself into, because I feel that they also really form me, and it's like a virus, and it's like already scientifically proven that you get affected on where you surround yourself with, and then I feel if I'm more conscious in the beginning on where I go, I don't need to unlearn it afterwards again. And I think that's one way. It's also one way of just self-caring and doing good to me. And then I think before I knew what this word meant, I could also relate, like it sounded, or at least what I read out of your text was a little bit about panic and then isolating yourself until the panic was gone, or at least that's something I've experienced. I'm not sure if that was also what you wrote. And there was something about just taking space and doing something completely different and letting life do its turn on healing or letting go of the panic. And this is another part. I'm also parallel doing a mindfulness retreat at the moment and really deep diving into myself. And I'm realizing how much fear there is still inside and how much of my actions are basically driven because there's fear, and it's more like out of fear and lack instead of like real wow. And so I thought if we could take much more time and just sitting back and reading books or listening to music or whatever it is, or being in nature, and then do maybe a third of all the actions, we might do much better for our world in total. So that's all the thoughts that came up, and I'm enjoying it already. I'm already very grateful for that space here.
I guess I'm the only one left. Sorry, my Wi-Fi is not so good, so let me know if I fall out. I think I also didn't know the word before, but self or reinventing myself, I think I mainly related to my upbringing, because it was in a very normal family. My two parents are engineers. My older sister started to study engineering, and we always got really contained frameworks. We always got a lot of rules, a lot of boundaries, which made it easy for you to know what you could do and what you couldn't do. And I was always very much used to this. And if I now reflect on it back, I realized that at that time, I didn't have my own identity at all. I started also to study engineering, of course, because, I just followed everything what was built up around me, I guess. And actually, when I moved to Berlin and learned to know very different views and very different ways of living, and basically by being open and talking to people, I realized how much I was having these boundaries set up by mainly my parents, but also my whole friend group and surroundings, like everyone that is still there now, they're all working from 9 to 5 in a job that they will be probably the next 10 years. My parents are already working in the same company for I mean, since they started, I guess. So there's really this attachment to structure that everyone needed in my surrounding, and I guess I really wanted to escape, a bit similar to Nina, like really this, I want to do something different, or like I really needed something, another view, I guess, and breaking with my parents. I mean, of course, they also felt that I was way more distant. I was doing a lot of things that they didn't really understand, like going through things that they didn't understand anymore. And that felt like there was a big distance between me and them. And that is still a bit true, but I also feel like by reinventing myself in this way, and reconnecting with them, and slowly trying to explain how I come to see the world now, it's also transforming their views, and that's really nice to see and to realize that by reinventing myself, I might also give them a chance for renewal. And my father is even talking about maybe moving to South Africa or Switzerland, and while they have been living in the same town for 40 years, and it's really, it's really also, like what Nina said, how people are actually built up by all the different encounters that they have, and all the different experiences they go through. And yeah, I think, at least in my view, there are many people stuck in these patterns, or in these barriers that they build up, or these boundaries that they set because they feel safe and they feel comfortable, but actually it's more an uncomfortable feeling, with which they re-identify themselves a lot. And I listened to a podcast of, what's the name? I forgot the name. I could search for it later. But he's also explaining how we always tend to identify with our past and the whole image that we have built up throughout our lives of ourselves, and how other people see us, and that if we strike with these images, that I think it feels bad or difficult to get out of this image what you think people have of you, and in that sense I feel like reinventing yourself, or self-creating your life, is really coming loose from all these identities you have built up, and the images that people have from you, but just go your own way. I don't know if it makes sense.
Thank you. I used to have this this urge of trying to identify like the true core of my being, like this one thing that is unchangeable, and I thought that, so there's several things around this that I thought. One thing is, yes, there is such a thing, and it is in fact unchangeable, because there is some deep socialization that has been engraved into my subconscious mind by my upbringing and my early experiences that leads to this thing. And it's this is the core. What I'm finding more and more is that as you or I start changing, like in a way, brick by brick, my configuration, I start opening up these foundations, and I can also start disassembling these foundations. And it's painful every time, deeply painful. And the image I'm using at the moment to explain this to myself is that there's a lot of information hitting our sensory inputs all the time, and it is interwoven and very, very complex. And we cannot deal with this type of complexity and with this lots of information. And some of it gets filtered out, but still we need to somehow be able to take this in and make sense of it. And the way we make sense of it is if I look at the information as like strands of information, like horizontal rain coming at me, I tie knots into this. Knots that help me make sense. Knots that sometimes they're feelings and sometimes they're symbols pointing to concepts. And going into those knots, untying them, and then tying new knots in places where I want them to be because they make more sense to me, because I'm now standing on the foundation of new knots that I have bound myself. This is where this becomes truly full circle, where I start even changing that fundamental inner core that I thought was so unchangeable.
Can I ask? Sorry.
No, carry on, Lina.
I just had one quick question. Thank you, Hermann, for Thomas. Can you just give one example for a knot?
Yes, absolutely. I can give you a concrete example from right now. So all my life, I've been living in a box in a city. We call it apartment. I just sold my apartment, and we're swapping this for a ship. We're moving onto a ship. Now, we're going to live in a 90-ton hunk of steel floating on the water, right? That was painful. Going through that, although I really love being underwater, I really love the idea, I really love this idea on so many levels, but still letting go of that box in a box, that was super hard. Painful.
Thomas, can you hear me? You spoke about a little bit earlier about the inner core, which you thought would be unchangeable, but you discovered it wasn't. But don't we have a core that is unchangeable? Don't you think so?
No, I used to think that, but I don't think it anymore.
Why?
Because the deeper you dig, so the direction is, imagine it's a Lego construction. All of the concepts of your life are Lego bricks, and they're built on top of each other, and somehow you have this notion that there is this foundation of this building that carries everything, and you can change the blocks around, or you can take the walls apart and build an entirely new house, but the foundations don't change. That's, for me, the representation of that inner core that doesn't change. But there's nothing in there that doesn't say, once you've taken away those walls, that you can start taking out of the foundations. You can even develop that thing further. You can. So if this is the space your house sits on, you can tear all the walls down. You can build a little house in the corner, and take down all of the foundation, and build a new foundation here next to it, and start building a new house there. You can, and then that house has nothing to do with your original self.
But you still need a foundation in order to place a house on.
Correct.
So why would I could imagine that, let's say I've laid a foundation that's not very solid, and eventually the cracks appearing in the wall. So I tear down the walls, I reinforce or lay a new foundation. But surely that's what it is, a foundation for carrying the house I want.
Mm-hmm.
So if I compare the inner core with the foundation, ultimately there are foundations that serve whatever they are supposed to serve better than other foundations. Namely, yes. For example, building a weak foundation. Let me share what I mean. About 20 years ago, I did a series of transformational workshops. And in the workshop number 2, you go and what they call discover your contract. In other words, a core value that is so ingrained, and you go through a process, and believe you me, if you go through a process and eventually you think you discovered something, you go onto a flip chart and write down I am whatever you believe to have discovered. You might even know that kind of workshop because at one stage it was under the title or topic I am whatever. Long story short, I went up to the flip chart, wrote something down, and got somebody tore the paper off and threw it at my feet after they crumbled it up, simply because it didn't sound as authentic. And believe you me, when I eventually walked up to that flip chart and wrote down I am compassion, I wrote that down, if you like, in many ways against my better will, but something from the inside was forcing me. I would have liked to be, I'm curious, I'm courageous, I'm a hero or whatever, but there I came up with I'm compassion, and which was fully accepted, and the experience was so deep that I knew it was authentic. Now, if you would, until that time, would have asked me, are you a very compassionate person? For many years in my life, definitely when I was drinking, I was anything but compassionate. Today, I know I'm actually an extremely compassionate person. I know, because a large part of my life is, and what I'm doing is based on the compassion I have for myself, yes, but also for others. So for me, that's a core value, and I don't think if I live another 10 years, it won't change. I've carried that. By the way, after the leader of that particular workshop acknowledged that as correct, because the way I behaved, the way it was presented, I still wanted to have something else, but eventually I couldn't help it. It manifests in the things, in the way I am and what I do. And I think, Thomas, a little bit, you have maybe experienced me even in that regard. A lot of the work I do is driven by compassion. So I think I have a core value that is maybe unchangeable.
I would also like to add something to that discussion. So for me, there's the me. I'm me. And the me is like it can change in all directions. It can be this and that. And I feel there's the me. I also call it my inner animal. I'm like the animal, which just is like when you watch a bird or a dog or whatever. And then I feel around this inner animal, there are all these belief sets on what I think I need to survive or to live a good life, or. But I definitely proved the case that all these belief sets are changeable, and that also for some people it's different than for others. And I see this as the foundation, and I feel the me is kind of like a felt sense. And it's somehow, this felt sense is also something that I remember from childhood on up until now, where I can say this is the me that was always there as a little girl and as an adult, and all the phases in between. And I somehow feel that with age and with all these inner, I've done also a lot of personal development stuff, this me becomes more infinite. It's almost like I'm the ocean, and then I'm the ocean, and then there are all these waves, and these waves are kind of the belief sets. But the me is really getting vaster and more spacious, and there's a lot more possible, and I'm of much more capable, and I need a lot less, or I enjoy other things. And yeah, for me it feels that there's some core. The core is the me, it's consciousness, it's presence. I think it's somehow like, I think the question around that one I have then is, how much is this me different to the you, or is it the same? Is this all just consciousness, or like what's the individual me? Is it because it's in this body, or yeah, I find, but yeah, that's my perspective. And I think like the last part, somehow this me is also connected to integrity, or like some kind of, there's this inner compass, this inner integrity that kind of guides me through all the different parts of the world, and yeah, groups of people. And compassion, I definitely can very much relate. Herman, I also discover more and more of the compassion that is me, and the love that is me. And there's also the fear that it's me sometimes, and the anger, and then there's the joy. But it's, yeah.
It's quite interesting to listen to you all. There was an element of like opposing views, while I actually don't experience them as opposing or contradictory. I don't know if you had the same experience, but I don't understand Thomas' comments as contradicting to Hammond's, because they, like, a lot of this happens on an experiential level without us fully understanding what is like that me, or that fundament, or like whatever we want to call this, right? I do think, and I'm there with Nina when she says, like, there's something that connects us all, and I do think that compassion is part of that, which is why, like, when you say I am compassion, that is not untrue, but maybe it's more like we are compassion. And for me, I was very much relating to, like, the way Thomas describes that you can deconstruct, and that a lot of what life is about deconstructing. And I wouldn't even go as far as rebuilding. I'm just taking these layers away and seeing what's left, like stripping yourself off of any identity. Like, whatever you're identifying with is typically something that does not really belong. It's coming from elsewhere. It's like something you want to belong to something. And oftentimes it's not very helpful, other than fulfilling that deep desire of belonging somewhere, to someone, or to a group. Not sure if it brings us closer to who we are. For me, I think I shared this last time already. Like, when I was in India, my whole system was rebelling for all these differences that I had to experience while being there. Like, everything that they thought is normal and I didn't. And for most of the time I was there, I did not, like, it was so hard being in that constant situation of being proven wrong, that what you think is normal has nothing to do with normal. And after I came back, I just, like, I had the space to realize how much we are trying to hold on to all these belief systems that don't really serve any purpose, like, other than that sense of belonging to an in-group, or like some group, whatever. Nowadays I laugh when people speak about these things and, try to convince me how they need to belong there, and how this is important and this is important in life. Like, I'm not laughing about them, but I'm just realizing, like, how I used to do all of this as well. It has created a lot of distance for me to actually look at things from more afar. Just going through this consistent experience for years, that no, what you think is normal is not normal for other people. This doesn't mean anything. And if you were born here, you would find other things totally normal. It's I do also agree with Herman. There are some things that are unshakable about us being human beings, I guess, that all hold us together. I just wanted to tap on this, and I'm not sure if we have time today, but when I was listening to all of you earlier, I was also thinking that there is a need for renewal and reinvention in the society. We've been talking a lot about us personally, And I do think these two things belong to each other to a large degree. But yeah, I think the bigger need is even on society to kind of rethink itself. But I leave it with that for now. But yeah, whole different box to open.
I'd like to make two comments, if I may. The one is going back to that experience, I am compassion. As I said, I wasn't, even though it came from a deep inner core, I didn't even know I could access. I wasn't totally happy because I thought, as I mentioned earlier, that, for example, I am courageous, I'm passion is a lot more powerful. So I even thought that. And eventually, I also questioned myself because I was a little shit for many, many years in my life, even to people closest to me. And so I asked myself, is my subconscious mind playing a trick on me, namely to declare, because I was a little shit, maybe a big shit even, that I want to compensate by now claiming I'm compassion. And I realized by really reflecting and going inside, I realized that actually that part of compassion was always there, but it was buried under a lot of rubble. The second comment and reflection I wanted to make, Juliana, you mentioned the renewal of society, and analog to that, we could say the renewal of systems. However, we are society. We are part of systems. So I think it is not the society as a whole we need to change. It's us to start with our own change in order to eventually have an impact and maybe recreate society in a more compassionate way, if you like. Thank you.
I feel there's a recursiveness to all of this, in the sense that how do you use your own mind to recreate your own mind? How do you take you as a part of society that has shaped you in a way and re-inject yourself in a new form into that same society, and then by doing so change that society? I think it requires that exact first step of individual clarification, clearing. That's one thing I that came to mind while I was listening. And another one that I wanted to ask you, Juliana, is as you what happens when you peel back those layers of the onion? What is the result there? Is that something like Nina said earlier, where you're like an ocean? You know, the peeling back can result in this expansion, or is it something? Do you find like something like a precious pearl inside? What's the direction?
I don't know, maybe it's not important. I also think it may be a matter of personal like experience or relation. Like I see why Nina would use the ocean. I would probably not personally do that. I have a more minimalistic view of this. I feel more like when you strip off these layers, you become more pure in a way, and then you can and that's why I related to what you said. You create options, like whatever you think is you and is unchangeable suddenly becomes variable. You can choose to use, to do, to be, but you don't have to. It is not you anymore. It is just an option to engage living life. Yeah. Like what you said about your apartment is quite profound, because like it's giving us so much safety. Like whenever I was in turmoil, I know like how important it was to come back to my house. Or if I had to leave my house for like external reasons, like what kind of turmoil that creates. And I went through a phase, for example, where I choose not to work. And so like money became like a scarcer resource for me. And part of me making space for a renewal process was to sublet my bedroom on Airbnb and sleep on my couch. And it was initially a painful thought, but once I made that decision, it didn't bother me actually one bit, because I realized I just have to strip myself of that thought that this is my bed and that belongs to me and is almost an extension of me, right? And when that was gone, it was purely a matter of me surviving and making space for that renewal process. Yeah. I don't know if that explains the onion, but in spirituality, we often speak about like being nothing. I think the process is more of finding out what else you can let go of, like what is not necessary, or what you could let go of. Maybe you don't always have to let go of it, but you know that I can also do without. I choose to be comfortable, but I don't have to identify it with it. It doesn't form me. It is not me.
But there's when you go into nothing, you simultaneously go into everything. And
you look, I don't claim to have gone there. Like I don't, that's why I kind of refuse to make a picture of it, because I don't know.
Mm-hmm. But what you're describing, I mean, sounds relatable. I can relate to what you're describing, and to me it sounds the letting go process, the nothingness part of this process opens optionality. That's how I heard you describe it. And this optionality, whether it's infinite or not, or whether you go down to absolute zero or not, it's not that relevant. You let go of something, and that opens optionality. And then the interesting question becomes, which of the options do you follow and why? Who makes that decision and why? I'm just going to shut up because I don't have answers.
I think for me, it's so much more and more and more about realizing that I don't know, and that there is no right and no wrong, and and that we all don't know. And even if I would say justice is like a real thing for me. I've been like, that's unjust, and then I go and become like the activist in me, or the rebel, or like the angry child, whatever. and I have really clear opinions on what is right and what is wrong, and I've also been always clear in telling everyone. And I'm getting more and more to this point where I'm like, shit, I don't know anymore if this is, for me, it feels good or painful or whatever it feels, but for the other person, it's different, or the other person also does it because of their own suffering and they're not knowing better. So I think there was also a lot of judgment from my part that they intentionally do something bad. And I don't know, I'm at the moment I'm playing a lot with this part about, I know for my, I have my, like, I know what feels good for me. I follow the things that somehow my heart draws me to, and then I allow all the others to do their thing and don't need to have them doing the same, and kind of accepting this. And it's not easy. It's really painful sometimes, because I'm like, shit, what are you doing there? This doesn't work like that. But and then there's something about trusting in a higher order. And I don't know, I would say, like, my life gave me several occasions where things just aligned in a way I could have never done it myself, and which was so much more magical than I would have ever dreamt of. And but what I do is that I'm really getting clear in my intentions and my values on, like, what's the intention behind that. And then I kind of trust in the higher, like, I see, okay, this friend is maybe not caring for the child like I would like her to do it, but I send the intention that she does it, that she will get the help, and I don't have to tell her, and because I can't do anything anyway, really, from here. But there's something about allowing for more diversity, for more chaos, and trust in the higher order by setting intentions of love and compassion. And it's also, again, also just a construct in my mind when I hear myself talking about it. But somehow it gives me, I don't know, confidence or...
I also would like to say something. It's super interesting to hear everyone's opinion about it, and there are many things I actually identify with, especially the part that Juliana said about like values, and how for other people values are totally something different. I always identified a lot with sustainability and long-term vision, and this world should be a better place, equality, like really these kind of values. But then I also kind of realized that for other people that this is maybe not at all the case, and why would long-term be better than short-term? Like, it's not the one or the other. And I was struggling a lot with it, but then I actually had a conversation with someone about it who told me, yeah, so this also feels a bit like this compassion or like a core value that you have. And I felt like these core values are coming from everything that has happened to me in my past, like every little thing that has happened brought me here and gave me these values. So I don't think I was born with it. And this person said to me that, okay, you can now distantiate from it, but in this way you can also, like, you are here now and all these things happened already to you, and you can now consciously choose to follow the things that feel good, although you know that they might feel good because of your past or because of something you've been through. And now you can make the conscious decision to choose for doing this or doing that. And one thing that I also really, what I always come back to if I start to think about these things, it's that I feel like it's kind of very sophisticated way to survive, or survival of humans or life. And I just wanted to share this.
I found Thomas' remark earlier about that he hears a certain aggressiveness. I actually heard something very different. Namely, I heard a passion out of these statements that were made.
Hermann? Passion dropped you off. Okay. Sure, he'll come back in. I'll send him a message quick. Hermann? Welcome back. You dropped out for us right after passion. Hermann?
Yeah.
You dropped out for us right after passion.
One correction, I didn't drop out, I was kicked out, or I lost the connection, I don't know what happened here. As I said, it shows you how different our perceptions can be. You identified whatever happened, and it was Juliana and myself talking. You experienced aggression. I saw it as passion. I definitely, if I speak for myself, I don't know what Juliana felt when she was talking about. But as far as I'm concerned, I definitely spoke out of passion and definitely not out of aggression.
I don't know. I lost the part. I didn't. I don't remember aggression coming up. But maybe I'm missing something.
Okay, then maybe I misheard you, because you said I'm hearing aggression coming up, and which, as I said, was very different to what then maybe I misheard you.
I don't know. Did anybody else hear me say that? I did. I don't remember saying that, and I never intended to.
I don't know. Do you refer to that part of opposing views, Hermann, where you said that you are compassion and Thomas said that the foundation is different? I don't know. That came to me.
No. It was a lot later. Juliana was talking. I can't remember now what she was talking about. And after that, I stepped in. And thereafter, and the way I heard Thomas, so maybe I misheard him, was that he said, I hear a certain aggression coming up.
No. I never said that. No. For sure not.
Okay. My apologies, Mr. Schindler.
Don't worry. All good. Happens when we have to switch video conference from one medium to the next, and everything is new. Don't worry about it. One strand of thought that somehow keeps coming up for me while I'm during this conversation is the question of does there have to be one truth, or can we hold multiple truths? Meaning, we're talking about the me, and I've been talking about the foundation. But what if I'm not on one foundation? What if that structure, that Lego structure that is me, that is constantly changing, is standing on multiple feet, many types of truths. What if that whole thing is much more malleable than we tend to think? I mean, one thing that comes to mind are these moments of where people have brain injury, and then suddenly their personality changes deeply. That makes you really question, is there only one way you are? Are there many ways you are? Are you many? Which one of you are you right now, and why?
Thomas, I think there are definitely more than one truth. Even within my own life, I had beliefs which I considered as real and truthful years back, which are very different to what I believe in today. And even that might still change again with additional experience, shifting consciousness, etc., etc. And I think what is important that if we have a conversation about being truthful, to always say it is my truth, and not kind of claim that I own the truth in general.
But doesn't that tie back to what Juliana said earlier about that we have a choice? So if experiences change you, then choosing an experiences changes you consciously, right? And I think it also ties into something I think Nina said earlier about, do I have to unlearn this stuff again? Do I choose my experiences wisely so I don't have to unlearn some useless stuff that I learned through that experience? And but then again, the question is who's the choice maker in this? Who's the choice maker in this?
I would wholeheartedly say yes to all the questions that you raised earlier. There are multiple truths, and I'm sure there is multiple legs on which you stand. For me, even the foundation is like what you call as a foundation. I think most of this is changeable. And actually, you proved that point before. But I think there's still something that may want to hold on to something that is not changeable. I think it is more us that we don't want to really believe that, that is, you can all peel it away, basically. What like the big question is then also what truth, what is that, right? Like, how do we get closer to, like, is there even a way of getting closer to it? Or are we just trying to rationalize something that we are just unable to understand? Like, are we just spoiling our brain power to understand something that we need to surrender to, and just let it be, maybe?
I had a beautiful conversation yesterday with somebody, Tyson Yuncker Porter, maybe you've he's written a book called Sans Talk. Maybe one of you has heard of it. It's amazing, and he talks about the indigenous people of Australia, and I've read it in the book. I've heard him talk about that in several conversations. But yesterday, during our conversation, for the first time, I really understood what he was saying when he refers to that. You have to listen to the lore of the land in order to be able to live somewhere in a place. And we've lost the attachment or the placeness in our life. And what he was trying to say is that wherever you find yourself in the world, the place that you're in dictates how you can live and survive. It's a different thing to be in a place full of wood. It's than to be in a place with plains, big plains, or mountains or sea or whatever. Your mode of living and survival and the culture that arises and the mind that arises out of this will be totally different. And somehow this echoes what I just heard you say, Juliane.
No, it's that I would also say this is also my experience. This force, that force is so strong that you can't escape. Like, that's why, like, I've lived in other places before that were more similar to Germany, and I didn't have that experience. But when I lived in India, I felt like eventually you feel like you have to surrender. There is no other way. You cannot, and which is why, like, I think if you move between most of our Western world, let's say, yeah, things have become so similar. Like, living conditions have become so similar in many ways that you don't face that pressure. But I just felt if I really wanted to connect with people in there, and I'm sure there's other places, I'm not trying to say this is the only place where you can experience this. The motion was so strong. Like, I keep telling people, like, look, if you go to that country, you have to jump into the stream. You can't stand by on the side and look at it. It's impossible. The stream will either, like, make you wash away, but better is to actually jump yourself, surrender to the stream, and just experience it. Yeah.
Yeah, the only thing I ever found, I think Nina heard me say that before in a different conversation. I think you were there. So this might be boring for you now, but I once spent a year thinking about what ultimately would be the difference between humans and machines. Assuming that machines can somehow start learning and doing whatever they might need in order to be successful, whatever that might mean. So in that scenario, they could learn to love if that was something useful for them. They could have all sorts of feelings. They could be surely stronger and better and faster at many things, most of things than we could ever imagine to be. But there's one thing that only humans are compared to machines, and that is being vulnerable. Because a machine can roll back its software state, it can roll back its data state. It can put on a new arm if the old one is broken. It can do all of these things. We cannot. If, as Nina pointed out, it's very hard to unlearn something. We cannot just roll back to a previous software state in our mind. It's really hard, or possible even. Once we are traumatized, we are traumatized. It'll take a long time to heal. So I think much of our choice making comes from that perspective, of the perspective of protecting ourselves from all sorts of vulnerabilities, and sometimes we find ourselves in conditions where the protection against felt subjective vulnerabilities are actually creating an adverse effect for us, where we have to start letting go of them.
Maybe
Go ahead, Nina.
one quick point, but I think I see this as the main problem of humanity at the moment, that we constantly trying to cover our pain points by fixing things. It's like the fixing mode is like also like an addiction, and it's very, very hard to not follow that drive. I can speak from experience.
Mm-hmm.
Can you give an example, maybe? This fixing, like
that you quickly. That's a good. That you see, okay, what example you see? They I think it's that so basically take the climate crisis at the moment, and we're looking at it and we are like all under pressure because it's also survival based, and we need to do something and we need to control it, and it basically kicks into our survival fears, which create pain or grief in the end. In the end, like if we would really sit with it, we would land in a lot of grief about all the forests that have gone and all the animals we have lost and so on. But because we don't want to allow ourselves, or we don't want to feel the grief because it's really fucking painful, we quickly try to find ways to fix it. But this then comes more, I think we don't really holistically look at things. We don't come from I think if we sit with the grief, if we give ourselves time, if we allow our emotions to flow through, we're going to find more holistic solutions that really connect with nature and find then the regenerative ways. And there are already people out finding it, but I would say that humanity in the last years, I always say, look at our tax system. Like, what have we done with our tax system in Germany? We have just put on layers on top of layers on layers and layers. So nobody actually understands anymore what's going on. It's the same with the financial system. We always just made a quick fix because something is going out of order, and we need to now it's the world basically that's under danger when the financial system breaks. So let's just make another protection and regulation instead of let's sink down and let's look really in the cause and and
that's what I call the untying of these knots, right? When you untie that knot, you will be exposed to much more complexity, and you just don't know how to deal with that complexity. And the way I notice it, to maybe add another example, is in the last year, 3 of my friends suddenly had dogs, and they're all in a position of their life where their children are leaving the house. So they're replacing the children with the dog, just to not go into that moment of, okay, now I'm up on my own terms again. And I find it very, very interesting.
Yeah, this actually, it's a nice comparison. When Nina spoke, I thought we are adding layers because we're not willing to let go of any layer. right? Like the peeling is not happening like in society.
Mm.
There may be people who do this individually, but society doesn't do any of that. We always say like systems are already in place and it's too hard. It's too hard to change them, right? It would require too many people to actually peel layers off because they would need to question themselves in that process. And if you participated in years of building these layers, it's very difficult to question yourself to unpeel them.
Yeah.
If
And
you're
this,
not already that kind of person that loves unpeeling, like the way we are in that very elite group here.
but thank you for pointing that out, Juliana, because this is actually the core of what, to me, this whole full circle exercise is about. And we're just in the first or maybe second phase of this experiment, where we're still talking about us individually and how we deal with with being humans, and then as we progress, we will start talking about how do we do this on a collective level, and then how do we do the same thing, like the peeling back or the building forward, and then finally, how do we actually build this shit, right? How do we bring this into reality? How is this done? And I'm really, really curious about where this is going to take us.
Yeah, maybe just a very small thought on this. Felt language is a big problem. Like even, and you may observe yourself, you're using language, and Nina had this moment, and like I'm feeling even weird saying it out loud that way, or something in those lines. Like I'm always thinking, like if my parents would come and listen into this, they would feel very spooky about this. Like if you want to get other people on board, I think we need to find a much more relatable language. That's why I also use that word elite group, because like we do enjoy talking about this, and we create our own vocabulary around it, but that's not relatable to the majority of people that need to participate in any societal change that you want to make happen.
I want to. I noticed that there's a lot of things that want to be said. So let's give Nina and Herman some space, and then I would like to start closing it for today.
Thank you. So just when I heard you talking, Juliana, I thought, because I've been working with homeless people, with poor women in Nepal and Africa, or also men, and it would be amazing to have those folks in the discussion, because I think that bring a lot to the table actually. And I always thought that we actually need to engage those people to bring us the solutions, because they have they don't have all the luxury and the complexity we have, but for them it's really all about life and survival. And I was just thinking would be an interesting exercise, but then as you say, it's about the language and how to talk and the trust and so on. But anyway, thank you so much. I really enjoyed this conversation.
I just wanted to put Juliana's mind at rest when she made the remark about the parents. I mean, you have a person in here who's not only a parent, but he's a grandparent already, so and approaches 83 fairly quickly. So I think there's no need to put a sticker on parents, because I think there are some elderly people, and hopefully I'm a positive example, who are quite willing to expose themselves to conversations like that, not only expose, but contribute, and sometimes make even controversial statements.
Yes, Salman. And I would like to even strengthen that point, because you're not normal. There's not many. There aren't many people like you out there. So I once had a conversation with the chief software architect of the Estonian e-government system, and they're like the best example for digitization of an entire government structure. And I asked him about, had a 2-hour conversation, and I tried to poke holes into the software architecture and see what he would change today. It was 35 years after they'd built this thing. And he couldn't find anything. We couldn't find anything. And he said the only real problem they've ever had was to really explain to people that this software key that they have really represents them. So if they give that software key to somebody else, and then this person buys a Porsche with their money, that's their problem. That's like, and they just couldn't get that concept into some people's minds. And it tended to be the elderly that had trouble adopting that concept. And he came back with probably one of the most hardcore sentences I've ever heard somebody say in a context like this. He said, after several experiments of how to really teach those people that this is crucial, they just decided they're just going to wait until they're all dead. Because they couldn't solve that problem. And I think there is something really important in this, which is letting go. And we talked about letting go a lot, and about pain is always connected. And letting go of assumptions about the world, letting go of loved ones, letting go of stuff, it's always painful. But I mean, I wrote about it this morning. There was even, and I had a really, really hard time to go through this and admit it, there was even something positive for me when my dad died. In the fact that this opened a space for me to be truly responsible for my own actions. I had to stand up for myself. I had no excuses. I could not fall back onto him catching me and carrying me and helping me anymore. Nobody was there. I was alone. And this changed something for me that I'm grateful for, although it was extremely painful to lose him. So, yeah, with that not so high note, I still would like to come to an end today. And I really, really thank you for showing up, and showing up, not only being here, but like making yourself vulnerable and showing yourself. I'm really touched. Thank you.
Same here. I really enjoy this. This is a very special place.
Thank you very much, and see you all next week.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Thank
Thank you.
Have a nice evening.
Have a nice evening.